You've just listened to episode 11, The Birth of Sweden. But in that episode, I kept using two words, Svear and Götar, and I realized I never told you what those words actually mean. Where do the names come from? What do they tell us about how these people saw themselves? Why does the country have one name in English, Sweden, and another name in Swedish, Sverige? And here is the harder question, the one that kept me up at night. How were these tribes even formed? Where did they come from before they had names? This is a bonus episode, a short dive into the etymology and the mystery of a nation. Let's start with Sveia. The first time anyone writes about them is in the year 98 AD. A Roman historian named Tacitus mentions a powerful tribe living in the sea, which he calls the Suonis. That's the Latin version of Sveia. So, what does the name mean? This is where it gets interesting. Most scholars believe it comes from an ancient Proto Indo European root, sway, meaning one's own or kindred. It's related to the Latin word suus, meaning his own, and even to the English word sibling. In other words, they weren't named for a god or a landscape or a legendary hero. They were named for us, our people, the ones who belong together. Some linguists argue it might instead mean sea people from an old word for water. Either way, this tribe living around Lake Mälaren in places like Uppsala and Stockholm gave their name to the entire country. Their kingdom was called Sverige, the realm of the Swedes. Over time, that became Sverige. The English name Sweden comes from a different root, from the Anglo-Saxon Svealand, the land of the Svear. Now the Uter. If the Svear are our own people, the Uter are something more primal. Their name comes from a Proto-Germanic verb, geutana, which means to pour or to steam. But pour what? Scholars believe it is a metaphor for procreation. The name Yeter likely means they who pour their seed. It is a powerful term for men, for the tribe of fathers, for the ones who create new life. This same root flows through their landscape. Yuta Alv, the Geet River, which still runs through their ancient territory. And here's where it gets really interesting. The same root, Yuto, is also the origin of the name of Goths. For centuries, Swedish historians argue that the Uter were the original Goth, the fierce tribe that sacked Rome. This belief, called Uticism, was a source of immense national pride. Whether it is true or not, the connection is there in the name, in the root, in the ancient sound of a people who called themselves the Pourers. There is one more tribe, the Gutar, the people of Gotland. They share the same ancient root as the Uter and the Goths. Their name means the same thing. But while the mainland Geats were warriors and farmers, the Gotlanders were traders. They grew rich on silver from the east. They built their own society, their own laws, their own identity. The Gutta saga, the saga of the Gotlanders, claims they were descended from a man named Theirvar, and his grandson Guti gave the island its name. That is the legend, not history, but it tells us something. The Gutar also wanted to explain where they came from. They wanted an origin story. So we have three tribes, one name rooted in us, one rooted in creation, one rooted in the sea and the silver trade. Three names, three identities, three threads that would eventually weave together to form Sweden. Where did these tribes actually come from, and how were they formed? The honest answer is we don't know. We don't know how the Sveir and the Uter were formed. We don't know where they came from before Tacitus mentioned them. We don't know when they began calling themselves by these names. We don't know if they migrated from somewhere else or if they emerged from the people who had lived in this land since the ice retreated. The first time anyone writes about the Sveir is AD 98. The first time anyone writes about the Uter is in the 2nd century. That is already hundreds, maybe thousands of years after people first lived here. For all those centuries, They left no written records. They left no origin stories. They left no explanation of who they were or how they came to be. They only left their bones, their tools, their graves, their names, spoken by Roman historians who had never seen them. We can trace the meaning of their names back to Proto Indo European roots. We can trace their migrations through isotopes and DNA. We can guess at their rituals from the things they buried with their dead, but we cannot know what they thought. We cannot know how they became them. Silence is not a failure of scholarship. It is the nature of the past. Most of it is lost. Most of it was never recorded. And yet, here we are, speaking their names, walking their land, carrying their DNA. The Svear called themselves our own people. The Götar called themselves they who pour their seed. Two different ways of saying the same thing. We are here, we belong, we will continue. And they did continue through the Viking Age, through the Christian conversion, through the civil wars and the scandals and the rise of Stockholm. They continued through Birger Jarl, who forged a kingdom but never called himself king, through Valdemar, the 11-year-old boy crowned at Linköping, who lost everything for love, through the lawmakers who recited the law from memory, keeping the kingdom together one word at a time. They continued through all of it, and they are still here. The Gutar are still on Gotland, the Uter are still in the south, the Svears still live in the north. The names have changed, the borders have shifted, the DNA has mixed, but the threads are still there. This is the limit of history. We can trace words back to their roots. We can trace bones back to their graves. We can trace DNA back to its ancient sources, but we cannot trace the moment a group of people decided to call themselves us. We cannot trace the moment a tribe was born. That moment is lost. It happened in the silence, in the centuries before writing, in the mouths of people who did not know they were making history. Maybe that is enough not to know everything, but to know that they were here, that they mattered, that they are still with us in ways we cannot fully explain. The Sveir called themselves our own people. The Uter called themselves they who poured their seed. The Gutar called themselves by the same root, but built a nation of traders on an island in the Baltic. Three names, three identity, one question that connects all of them. Who are we? That question did not die with them. We are still asking it. The kingdom of Sweden wasn't born from conquest alone. It was woven together from these three threads. The Sveir gave the country its name. The Uter gave it a connection to the ancient world. The Gutor gave it its first taste of global wealth. That is the story behind the words. But the deeper story, the one we cannot know, is the story of how they became them in the first place. That story is lost, and maybe that is okay because we are still becoming us. Every day, every generation, every person who arrives and learns to call themselves Swedish. The names are old, but the question is new. Who are we? And who gets to decide? That is not a question for history, it is a question for us. Until next time, keep looking beyond the Swedish postcard.